I'm going to be picking him up at some point at the beginning.
Tis a gift,
joyful,
tis a gift,
grateful,
to be loved, simple gift.
tis the gift to be simple, tis the gift to be free, tis the gift to come down where you ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. Tis the gift to be loved and the love to return. Tis the gift to be taught and a richer gift to learn. And when we expect of others what we try to learn each day, we'll all live together and we'll all learn to say, when true simplicity is gained, together we shan't be ashamed to turn and turn where will be our delight, till by turning, turning we come round right. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight.
Beth, it's showtime. How are you?
Good to see you, Mark. Good to see you. Yeah.
Good to see you. Who were you holding there?
Oh,
Who were you holding just there?
that's Teddy Bear.
Oh, beautiful.
Shiloh. Yes.
That's cute. That is fun. That was beautiful. So tell me about the music that you were just playing there. The simple
it's very
gifts.
special, and I guess this morning I was at the park with Teddy, and I was watching the children in the park at the playground, and you know what's funny? They don't walk; they all run. Everywhere they go, they run. And
well, I guess that's true.
But the grown-ups walk.
Yes,
when do we
walk.
start growing up? I mean, what happens? But musicians don't grow up, do they? I don't think.
No, I don't think so. Ultimately, I think we're all children at heart. You know, I do.
So
exactly.
that music, Simple Gifts, that came from a very, very special recording session that Dodie Pettit, who you'll meet a little bit later, produced. An amazing session. And the two beautiful, glorious singers you heard were Christiane Tisdale and Suzanne Ishii. And it was just a beautiful session. There were 35 songs recorded, not all in one session, but it became a beautiful 2 CD set. But so this particular piece, I was brought in to do some orchestration on it, and so I had Christiane and Suzanne. I asked them to be placed so that they would not be isolated from each other, that they would actually face each other and
Okay.
improvise a little bit at the beginning. So I said, look at each other and I will start playing, because I was playing piano, or whatever it was that I played. And then I said, just start talking about some of the simple gifts. Joyful, da da. And so they did that.
Really?
And I said, if you're through, then I'll sort of wrap it up and we'll go into the body of the song. But let's not
That is
really rehearse. Let's just do it and see what happens. And I thought the result was beautiful. But
that's amazing.
the whole reason for this CD that Dodie produced, it's called Forever Always. And people who unexpectedly lose loved ones have various ways of coping.
Yeah.
Shortly after Dodie lost her husband and partner, Kevin Gray, there was a magnificent memorial service at the Majestic Theater with thousands of people there to honor him and her. Shortly after this celebration, Butch Jones, Dodie's wonderful friend and recording engineer, called her up one day and said, Dodie, it's time. We have some work to do. There's work to finish. Come on down. Let's start working on Saturdays. Let's see what we can do. It didn't make any sense to her at the time, but out of sheer desperation and just needing to escape, she went. And
Wow.
little by little, she started calling some of her colleagues and saying, I'd like to do this tribute to Kevin. And every one of them said, yes, I'm in. And she had over 150 Broadway colleagues, 9
Wow.
orchestrators. I was one of them. It was amazing. And so, Matt, could we see some of the photos from there's Butch Jones, and that's the Forever Always CD. And you can find it on Amazon or anywhere, and it is beautiful with all of the biggest Broadway stars. Oh, and there is a full cast recording. I did an arrangement of You'll Never Walk Alone, and we had this 27-piece voice choir, and I'm in the front. There's Butch, there's Dodie, and there's Kristen Blodgett on the other side of Dodie, who was conducting for Phantom of the Opera for over 30 years now, and Cats, and many, many other things. So there are Christiane and Suzanne listening back after Simple Gifts, and I'm hiding there in the back, and there's Butch. But so I have a quote about this CD. Forever Always, the memorial CD in honor of the late Kevin Gray, reflects his huge talent and how appreciated he was by his colleagues in the theater. Just listen and enjoy. Hal Prince. Speaking of the simple gifts that we began with, like an innocent child, who could be more simple and innocent than an animal? Oh, look at them. So now we go behind the scenes of the Mayor's Alliance for New York City's Animals, with 2 amazing individuals who have combined their former careers with their passions. The Alliance president, attorney Jane Hoffman, left a successful private law practice on Wall Street, and she helped create the Animal Law Committee of the New York City Bar. And now she only wants to focus on animal welfare, animal shelter, and rescue work. Because she said, at the end of the day, do I want to die with the most stuff or die doing something I believe in, something that I love, that I really care about? And Alliance Director of Communication, Steve Gruber, he came from a history of organization management, marketing, advertising, emergency response planning, event management, volunteer supervision. And with his huge love of animals, he is helping make this happen. And we're going to talk to them about it. Oh, there they are. Hi, Jane. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Beth.
Hi there.
So great to see you. So please tell us about the Mayor's Alliance, why it was created, its mission and everything. Just jump in, whoever wants to talk about it.
Okay, Beth. Well, thank you, and I'll start. Back in 2002, when Jane founded the Alliance, began the process of founding the Alliance. Roughly 3 out of every 4 animals coming into the city shelters didn't leave alive, and it was roughly a 25% live release rate. So the Mayor's Alliance was formed with a specific mission to end the euthanasia of homeless animals, homeless cats and dogs, simply because they didn't have a home. And it was certainly a solvable problem, but one that needed some very, very creative and strategic efforts to make it happen. So that's what our mission was, and why Jane got set this in motion.
Wow.
Yeah, so we started off with a strategic plan, a 10-year strategic plan, and we had 4 core objectives: increase adoptions, increase spay neuter, increase resources, and just make the public aware of this issue. So we pulled together a coalition, what turned into be 150 animal rescue groups and shelters in the greater New York City area. And we proceeded to create a couple of initiatives that would aid us in achieving our goals of decreasing euthanasia. And to do that, one was Adopt-A-Palooza, which was a huge adoption event in several parks, but the signature one became in Union Square, where we would pull together, 50 of the animal rescue groups with adoption vans and in tents, the green market tents. And the public would come, and it was a family-friendly environment. It was a great place to come and meet your 4-footed family members. So
we did this twice a year, and it became a very highly anticipated event. So many people in New York waited for Adopt-A-Palooza to adopt.
And we had cats and dogs and rabbits, because there's a lot of rabbits that go into the shelters. We had vets on hand, we had groomers on hand to educate people. People could get their animals microchipped. Emergency management came, and even sanitation came and gave out poop bags. So it was really sort of a fun event. And our wildlife rehabbers, like the wonderful Wild Bird Fund, would come. So that was one of our initiatives. Another one was the Feral Cat Initiative, which was to train people all over the city to do trap, neuter, return, which is the only humane and effective way of controlling our community cats who are outside through no fault of their own. That was a huge effort, and it was the people with boots on the ground, the New Yorkers who were out there in their neighborhoods, trapping the cats, getting them spayed or neutered, and returning them to their homes, which happened to be outside, unless they were kittens or they were, formerly house cats who had gotten dumped out for some reason. And then we could put them into our other animal rescue groups and shelters to help get them adopted, and many of them then went to Adopt-A-Palooza. And then we had more initiatives, but the big one that was the most impactful was the Wheels of Hope. And that
Oh.
one it was the transport program, custom made vans that would take animals from ACC primarily and take them to the animal rescue groups and shelters that had pulled these animals from the animal care centers, the city shelter. And one story which we had talked about was Debbie Fierro was one of our wonderful drivers. And one day she showed up at the Manhattan ACC to pick up her dog to take out to Little Shelter, New Hope partner out on Long Island. And Bella comes trotting out on her wheelchair. Her back legs, something had happened to her back legs. So Bella had been pulled by Little Shelter to rehab her. And Bella went to Little Shelter. They worked with her. They eventually got her off of the wheelchair. She eventually got adopted by a wonderful gentleman, and her sibling, 4-footed family member, was a Rottweiler. So you've got Bella, the little pug, who recuperated, and that was the effort of everybody, aided by our initiative.
Wow. Matt, could you show some of those Adopt-A-Palooza photos? There's Union Square.
Yep. And Petco Foundation was one of our big sponsors, and we were right outside their store. So when people adopted, they could go into Petco and buy more stuff than God for their new 4-footed
look
family.
at those guys.
Yep. So,
Look at those faces.
I know. And that was Animal Haven, one of the shelters in New York City, wonderful shelters downtown Manhattan. And they were always there with their wonderful animals. This is a picture of one of our trained people feeding an outdoor cat, a community cat, a very attractive one, by the way. They're trained to trap them and then return them, and how to properly manage their community, so the colony, so they don't become a nuisance. And this is one of the ancillary courses that are taught. There's bottle feeding, how to do TNR, but then bottle feed. If you can get the kittens out before they're 8 weeks, you can they can become adoptable. The ever popular neighbor relations, shelter building. It's just a whole program to support that community in their efforts. And once again, it's wonderful New Yorkers doing this out of their own pocket, just taking care of a problem. And there's Debbie on the right with the red, well, I guess that's the left, and another staff member. And that was one of the vans, and that was one of the dogs that came from ACC, Animal Care Centers, and went to Animal Haven to get adopted. And there's Bella.
Bella, right.
Yeah, the young lady with the sort of to Debbie's side, that she's from Animal Care Centers in Manhattan, and there's Bella in her little wheelchair.
Wow.
Oh, and this is sort of our current focus. One of the things that we're doing now are trying to go back to doing more work with the city, which I used to do a lot more of. We accomplished our mission of achieving 90% live release rate, over 90% at animal care centers. Say what that means.
So over 90% live release rate meant that basically only 1 out of 10 animals didn't leave alive, and we did that achieved that for 3 consecutive years.
So we decided to change our focus and go back. So now we're providing limited service and resource like transfer that is not covered by other groups. We do a lot of work with the city. Steve is on the animal planning task force and does a lot on that. We work with on the legislation. We try to be the connector. Like, for instance, we may be working in the future when Broadway comes back even bigger, better, and stronger with Dorothy Berloni, Bill Berloni's wife, with the Broadway Green Alliance, so that when a production is closing or deacquisitioning linens and towels, we will pair them up with an animal rescue group and shelter that can always use those to keep their animals comfortable until they get into new homes.
God. Speaking of Bill Berloni, didn't you do something with them for Chitty Chitty Bang Bang?
Bang
Yes,
bang.
that
What
was
was
one of our favorite things. You know, Bill always uses rescue dogs. He's just a saint in his shows, and rescue cats. But this particular one, they were casting for Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and he reached out to us and asked us, would we pull together some groups that could bring dogs to audition? And we did. We pulled in about 5 or 6 groups. We were in one of the, rooms at one of the hotels right around Broadway. And I believe about 3 of the dogs actually were cast, went to live with Bill, and were cast in the show. I think it was like a collie and a sheepdog and some other dog. So that was the groups were so thrilled to be part of that, because of course they also participate in Broadway Barks. You know, we worked on Broadway Barks with Bernadette Peters and, Mary Tyler Moore to put on Broadway Barks for many, many years. So, the groups feel very close to Broadway, the Broadway community.
now? So your current focus has shifted a little bit because you've been training some of the other shelters to take over some of the things so that you can
Right.
do other things and educate people around the country, right?
Right, correct. What we did is that last year we realized that we had achieved what our mission was, to achieve over 90% live release rate and sustain that. And we decided that to make the initiatives bigger, better, and stronger, it was time to move those over to the groups and shelters, which we had helped make bigger, better, and stronger. So we were able to transition our Wheels of Hope to Best Friends, who we had always worked very closely with. And we transferred the Feral Cat Initiative to Bidewee, which is another one of our leading shelters here. And Adopt-A-Palooza, we had worked with a group for a while on that, and we transferred the management of Adopt-A-Palooza. So the beautiful thing was when Steve and I transferred these programs over, it was like a program in a box. Here's the staff, here's the program, here's the assets, it's all set up, run with it. So that's been really successful. So Steve and I were in St. Louis. We got invited by Purina earlier this year before the zombie apocalypse hit us to teach to talk to their coalition about what we did in New York. So that was very, very satisfying, but then everything ground to a halt. But that will be a big focus of ours going forward. And the one slide about the animal law book is I also go out and teach, guest lecture for friends of mine who are professors at various law schools about animal law. And talk about how public policy, lawyers have a big part in forming public policy, which is really, we changed the public policy in New York City about animal welfare. And today we have an Office of Animal Welfare in the mayor's office. Steve works on the Animal Planning Task Force. Do you want to talk briefly about that?
Yeah, I mean, the Animal Planning Task Force it was created after Hurricane Katrina back in 2006, when cities across the country, were required actually to come up with plans to accommodate people and their animals during disaster because of the horrible consequences from Katrina, and so many lives were lost. New York jumped right in, and we developed a plan, a hurricane plan, a coastal storm plan, and to work when there's a hurricane like Hurricane Sandy back in 2011.
Yeah.
But what we've been working on this year, obviously, is COVID-19 and adapting New York's response to accommodate the needs of this particular crisis. And one of the big things is the COVID Pet Hotline, which provides information and referrals to people and hands-on help for people who need help to either care for or place their animals, whether they've been hospitalized or, unfortunately, some people died and left pets behind. But it's been an evolving kind of process in getting these protocols going, because as the pandemic changed and the needs changed, we're constantly updating the plan and to respond.
And another thing we're doing is trying to be a connector. Like Steve and I are wearing masks because we fully support the wearing of masks. It's the only intelligent thing to do. but these were actually made by
Ada Neves, who is a renowned fashion pet fashion designer. She's worked with us on the several fashion shows, including the pet fashion show each year at the Hotel Pennsylvania. But Ada she's a wonderful person, and she put her talents to good use. I mean, she has done a great deal for animal welfare. But in this case, she and her mother, also named Ada, got together and sat at their sewing machines and made these wonderful pet masks, and she distributed them gave us a number of them to distribute to New York City shelters. And this was her way of contributing to the effort here. This was very early on in the crisis. So it's this kind of these kinds of relationships that we are fortunate to have, we built over the years, and are able now to continue to put people together, for good outcomes.
Oh, God, that's so wonderful. Well, how at this time or any time can the public help? Can you foster now? Can you adopt? What or can you volunteer? Or donate, of course.
Yeah, donations are always, obviously, financial donations are great, but people can also donate in kind, like towels and sheets. Clean towels and sheets are always needed by shelters. If you can sew, you can make masks. We had a woman who wanted to support her local business who was a sewer, a quilter, and there's something called cage comforters. They're small quilts, sort of for animals to make them more comfortable. She went out and bought the product to support her local sewing store. She made them. She sent them to us. We were able to distribute. She had reached out and said, I want to help. What can I do? So there's always that. Right now, New Yorkers really stepped up, and there's a lot of pets in foster homes. We're hoping that continues. Fostering is one of the most important things you can do to help the shelters to keep the populations down, kind of thing. So,
but isn't it? Oh, so many people are finding that that they're not allowed to foster or adopt. That it's very difficult right now.
Well, the adoptions are going on online with almost all the shelters. You can go online, and then they arrange for an appointment for you to come in because they're not fully open yet. But fostering, it was like one of those good problems, because when ACC, Animal Care Centers, asked for volunteers to foster, they thought, oh God, I hope we get 50. They got 2,000 applications to foster. Yeah, and that was a wonderful problem to have. But then it did become a little difficult to get a foster. And of course, one of the most wonderful things to have right now, as you know, with Teddy, is have a 4-footed family member right there with you, especially for New Yorkers who might be more homebound, kind of thing. So, and if anybody wants to check out more about what we're doing, if you check out our check out our website at animalalliancenyc.org, and especially look at the blogs, you can read what we've been doing and what our current mission is right now.
That's great. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, good. There's how to reach you. And well,
yeah, thank you for having us. This is a pleasure.
Yeah, we really, really appreciate the opportunity.
I loved it. I look forward to talking more and meeting you in person when we can. I really do. But,
yes, we'll have to do lunch when we can all meet again.
You bet. I can't wait. So thank you.
Be
well. Enjoy.
You too.
Say hi to Sully and all the felines.
Yeah. We will. They seem to all be napping at the moment.
They're camera shy.
Great.
All right.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to the Aztec two-step segment. We're big fans.
Yeah. So here we come. So
Okay.
see you later. Now for that visit with Aztec Two-Step, Aztec Two-Step 2.0. Let's start with the prettier one of the group, Dodie. Where are you, Dodie?
Hi, Beth.
Hi,
Beth.
Hi. We told you a little bit about her at the beginning of the show, about the CD, why she did it. This Renaissance woman who just looks like a beautiful face, but she was a principal dancer with 2 major companies. She won the Lifetime Achievement Award for commitment to the arts and excellence in the field of dance. At the same time, she was in rock bands, girl bands, boy bands, you name it. And she played at the Bitter End and Don't Tell Mama in New York City, the Troubadour and the Palomino in Los Angeles. I remember those. Caesar's Palace in Vegas, clubs in Nashville. Now at the end, you're going to hear something that she did in Nashville. I mean, she's a sassy country girl too. So the end credits, we're going to do something really fun. So hold on for that. Her songs have been on the Billboard charts, but then one fine day, she was killing time before a regular ballet class on 14th Street in New York City. And she saw this very small little, hardly noticeable notice on the bulletin board at the studio that changed her life and actually changed her species for a while. What was that, Dodie? Tell us.
Let me just step back 1 second and say I had moved to New York by that point, and I was working in a recording studio on 20th and 6th Avenue, a very well-known recording studio called Blank Tape Studio, where a lot of big artists were recording. I was trying to establish my career in the music business at that point. And by the way, in 1979, that's where I met Rex and Neil, Aztec Two-Step, because they were brought in to do their 5th album, The Times of Our Lives. And we spent at least a month in the studio together, and I sang on the record and played guitar. So we established our friendship way back then. But you're right. I used to go from 20th Street down to 14th Street to Morelli Ballet and take my ballet class every day to keep my workout up. And I did see a notice on the board. It was my very first encounter with a Broadway show, and I looked at this notice and I was ready to segue out of full-time ballet. And a couple of friends of mine had been on Broadway, namely B.B. Newworth, my good friend from Princeton Ballet. She had made a Broadway career. And I said, you know, sounds pretty good to me. Maybe I should go for this audition. What the audition said was they were looking for a ballet dancer who could sing high for a new show coming to town called Cats. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I should try. And so I went to the Booth Theater at a certain time, I guess a couple of days later. And what I didn't know was that they had already been auditioning everybody in New York. And the choreographer, Gillian Lynn, couldn't settle on one character, which was Victoria the White Cat. And so she was still looking, after 6 months, she was still looking for this white cat. And so they brought in about 20 or 30 dancers on the stage of the Booth Theater that day. It was sort of like a final audition for this. I jumped over all the other auditions and landed up in this audition, my very first try. And so we spent 3 hours on the stage with Gillian Lynn. And after the 3 hours, there was 3 of us left. At which time I thought, oh, well, it's going to be one of us. But they said, come back tomorrow. I was exhausted. But anyway, we came back tomorrow. And lo and behold, there were then 4 of us. And the 4th person was none other than Cynthia Onrubia, who was a great, well-known Broadway dancer, had been in lots of Broadway shows. And I said, well, who the hell is she? Where's she come from? Well, she had come from lots of Broadway shows, and we had to compete against her. At which time we also had to sing, which is my first time ever singing a Broadway audition, for the director, Trevor Nunn, and Andrew Lloyd Webber himself. I did not get the role. Everyone knows that Cynthia Rubio got that part, and rightly so. She was gorgeous in it. But a year later, when they auditioned for replacements, I went back, and they took me into the show right away as a swing, and for 5 parts. And Cynthia was one of the parts that I had to stand by for Cynthia. And I was very proud to do that.
Wow. Well, swing, that is something that's kind of fascinating, because I don't know how many Broadway performers can do that, but you tell us what swing means and what parts you actually had to cover. And could you tell about the Gumby cat?
Oh, I gotta try to do that. I guess what you could say is sort of like a designated hitter in a baseball team. A swing is needed to stand by for the ensemble people. There I am with Clint Bowers, I'm seeing, and myself, and there's the white cat who replaced Cynthia Rubio. That's Claudia Schell. And so there's me as Syllabub there in one of my costumes. I was playing Syllabub there. And there I am playing the white cat with Clint Bowers there. So there's 2 of my parts. But anyway, a swing is someone who covers the ensemble people and learns multiple tracks of the show. They do not cover principal people. If you were to cover a principal person, you'd be a principal understudy. And I have done that as well. I did that in Phantom. I was principal understudy for Christine and Meg. But in Cats, I was swung for 5 parts. And at first I was a little bit, I'm not as good as the other people. They don't think I'm as good. But yes, they do. They know you're as good as the other people. And you have to be even better because you have to cover completely different people who do completely different things. Like, for instance, I had to do the white cat, which was very balletic. And then I had to cover Bonnie Simmons, who sang the Italian aria on the boat. And she sang a solo, Gus the Theater Cat. I had to do the Gumby cat, which was the lead tap dance cat, et cetera, et cetera. I had to do a lot of different things. And I loved it. I loved the challenge of being asked to do different roles on Broadway instead of just the same thing. And if you want, I'll tell you the Gumby cat story.
Yeah, please do. I love that.
Okay. Yeah. So the Gumby cat is the fattest old cat. She's a mother cat. She's had many, many litters of kittens. So she comes out in this gigantic coat, which I tell you, spreads out 2 feet on each side and has a long tail like this big around, and it's very, very, very heavy. It takes 4 people to take it off of the Gumby cat once she's on stage before the tap number starts. So I go out there in the Gumby cat, and I'm getting to the part of the number where the 4 people are supposed to take the coat off. And I put 1 foot up in the air so that the one, Marlena Danielle, could take off my booty, because you're wearing booties too. She pulls off the boots, and with that, I fell onto my back into the coat. And my feet are up in the air, and I'm rolling back and forth like a turtle on its back on the stage. And I'm going, help me, help me, help me. And the girls are looking at me on the ground, and they're laughing so hard that they run off stage laughing their asses off because they got to go get their shoes and tap. And all the other tappers start coming on stage like this, ba-ba, ba-ba, and they're looking at me on the ground going, ha, 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 like that, and laughing at me. I'm going, somebody get me out of this coat. Nobody helped me. And I wiggled like this. I wiggled, and I pushed it back, and I wiggled, and I got myself up, and I ran to the front of the whole ensemble, just enough to do da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I missed about the first 16 bars of the number. I think, it was mortifying. It was another day in the theater, but it amused the rest of the cast, and they love things like that to laugh about. Other people's misfortune on stage. They love that. It just breaks up the whole day for them. They talk about it in the dressing room. But honestly, I think, looking back, I think maybe the audience didn't know. They might have thought that it was a bit on purpose, that because there's a lot of comedy and she's a comic character, maybe they thought it was a bit on purpose. I don't know.
So you could have stayed with that show indefinitely, couldn't you have? But then you heard about, what did you hear about next?
Well, everyone heard of Phantom of the Opera coming to town, and it was the talk in all the dressing rooms. And who's going to audition and what's going to happen. I didn't want to audition because Cats was the biggest hit on Broadway. I knew it was going to run. I wanted the job. And other shows have opened and closed, like at least 10 of them while I was in my 4 years there. And so I didn't go to audition. And but one day the casting director called for me to go in and audition for the role of Meg, because they knew I had been a previous ballerina and could dance on point very well. And so I did go. And I went and auditioned for the role of Meg, which I did not get. I got right up front, but I got a role in the ballet chorus, ballerina number 6, the Trident Lady. And I understudied Meg. And what that picture you just saw was that 3 years into the run, I re-auditioned for the role of Christine understudy. And they took me from the ballet chorus to the singing chorus, where the Christine understudy does the Mirror Bride, and she's called the Princess or whatever. So I played 3.5 more years as the Princess and Christine understudy. And that picture you just saw was my opening night of playing Christine with my late husband, Kevin Gray, as the Phantom.
Wow. Wow. Oh,
Long
well,
journey.
Okay. Staying on the dark side for a couple of minutes more. Whoa. There's
Whoa, what is that? That's cool.
Dracula, the Covenant. Could you keep that on for a minute, Matt? Yeah. It's terrifying and darkly romantic. Well, Dodie and Kevin years ago wrote this amazing, terrifying and darkly romantic version of Dracula, but with some of the most mind-blowing music that you can imagine, and which was written by Dodie. Kevin wrote the book and the lyrics, and years later I was brought in to be one of the main orchestrators for this riveting music, and then we mixed it with our darling Butch Jones that you saw with Dodie earlier, holding
a piece of it
forever. Yeah. So we are going to play a couple of minutes of the song that introduces Dracula to Jonathan Harker shortly after he arrives at the castle. So could we see? Oh.
What is this place? Hello? Is someone there? Hello?
You needn't shout, my friend. I'm old, but not yet hard of hearing. In fact, my powers of hearing are quite acute. As you have entered my home freely and of your own will, you are welcome to stay. Forever, if you like. The children of the night. What music they make. I know.
Come and drink my wine, and before you know, your true soul will come through. All you need is my touch to be freed of so much. Then you'll feel that spark turn to raging fire of life eternal in you. I will give this to you. Then I shall bid you good night.
Oh yes, my friend. You will not leave this room. The castle has many rooms, but they are old and hold no interest to you. There are reasons things are as they are. If you saw as I see and knew what I knew, you would understand. This is Transylvania, not England. Our ways are not yours. Fear not, you will have all you require. Good night.
Good night. God help me.
Thank you, Beth. That's your orchestration there.
So tell us.
So that was Michael Hunsaker there as Jonathan, with Kevin Gray as Dracula singing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I think that was the very first of many of the orchestrations that I did
But
shortly
you were
after
involved,
we met.
yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We actually had done two before Kevin actually passed away. So he got to hear two of his pieces done full orchestra, and they're on his solo CD, that's My Time to Shine. So he did get to hear some of it in fruition. But the rest of it was left just Kevin Gray vocal and my piano part, because we went into the studio just to preserve the score, a piano vocal. And since Kevin passed away, I decided to finish the rest of the orchestrations, which is where you came in to help us finish the rest of the 12 other pieces.
Oh. And so what's next with it? What are you planning with it? Concert, CD, Broadway, what?
Well, if we ever get this opus finished, which hopefully we will, right, Beth? This year, we're going to.
Yes.
I want to, mention very quickly our cast, because I couldn't do it without these wonderful people. Bob Cuccioli has come in. I've asked him to come in and help direct my actors on their dialogue. What I'm doing is I'm recording an entire show CD with text, with the acting segued into songs from soup to nuts. So you get the entire show on CD, not just the highlight songs. So Bob is helping me with the actors while they're acting their scenes. And then to replace Kevin and certain parts where I needed some Dracula, which I didn't have, we're using Paul Scheffler. And then for the other people, Tim Jerome, Christiane Tisdale, Gary Moracek, John Keebler, Michael Hunsaker, who you just heard there, and Kate Suber as Miss Nina. Love Kate. So they're all going to be on this CD, all well-known Broadway players, and they're all fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
So hopefully we'll get it up somewhere, but I'm going to put the CD out first so everyone can hear the CD. And then Beth, maybe we'll pull an orchestra together and do a live sing through with an orchestra. How about that?
I would like that very much. So next, One night I had a blast at in Manhattan at the Iridium in Midtown. I got to perform with Aztec Two-Step. First, I was just going to accompany Dodie on a couple of Broadway songs, and then I ended up doing a lot of the show. And God, it was such fun to see the cult following this group has. And of course, Dodie was a totally new addition after Neil retired, and that had to have been a challenge because they expected a certain thing. But Rex, could you join us?
Say hi, everybody, to everybody.
Hey there. How are you?
Hey.
There he is. Hey.
So to start out, it's such an interesting name, Aztec Two-Step. Where did that come from? And then 2.0. So tell me.
Well, 2.0 was actually Neil's idea. But at the time, there were so many duos that used their last name, successful duos, starting with Simon and Garfunkel, Seals and Crofts, on and on. I just didn't want to be pigeonholed in that as a duo. I was, discovered the Beat generation in college, Jack Kerouac specifically, then Allen Ginsberg, and I was totally into the poetry at the time. And there was this guy named Lawrence Ferlinghetti, who I was a big fan of. And that's where I took the name from a collection he had, A Coney Island of the Mind. And the poem went something like, see, it was like this. We waltzed into this place and a couple of papish cats is doing an Aztec two-step. I was about to split when this guy comes up, when this chick comes up and says, you and I could really exist. Wow, I says, only the next day she has bad teeth and really hates poetry. So that's where I grabbed Aztec Two-Step from. Of course, I didn't realize at the time Aztec Two-Step is better known as a form of dysentery in Mexico than it is a dance step in Lawrence Ferlinghetti's poem. But I was big time into the beats. I wrote a song before I met Neil based on Kerouac's novel, On the Road. And according to his biographer, Dennis McNally, it was the first song ever written for or about Kerouac, which is amazing because the song was, we got signed to Elektra, and it was on our debut album that came out in May of '72. At that point, it had been 15 years from the time On the Road had been published. So I would have thought way before then somebody would have written songs for or about Kerouac's work. He was so instrumental and culturally speaking and whatnot. You know, he's the precursor to the hippie movement and all that stuff. So it turns out that the other band who followed in our footsteps had a song called Cassidy. And I can't remember the Ungrateful Deceased or something like that. That's some band, I don't know, Grateful Dead, whatever they're called, I forget. But they followed on our footsteps, and then of course it just was an avalanche of great songs. A couple written by Tom Waits, who I'm a big fan of as well.
Well, after we've been in the darkness for a while with the Phantom and Dracula. Could we do something for the little kids? Maybe a nursery rhyme or a fairy tale, or put a couple of them together, something like that to lighten.
Yeah. Well, I'm unlike my partner, my former partner Neil Schulman, who was born and raised in Manhattan. I was not. I was born in Kansas City, moved my family when I was 1 year old to Massachusetts. And then around the first grade, I moved to Moodus, Connecticut. Then I moved my family from there up to Maine in the fourth grade. And so I was always a rural kid, except for Kansas City, which, I couldn't wait to get out. I had to get my family out of the, the reddest state in the Union. So anyway, make a long short story. when I moved to Manhattan after meeting Neil in Boston in May of 71, or whenever it was, March of 71, I went right to the public library and did some research. I wasn't really familiar with Manhattan, obviously, growing up in a little town that had 3,500 people in it, Pittsfield, Maine. And so what I discovered at the library was Humpty Dumpty actually met Cinderella for the first time at one of those outdoor cafes, one of the original outdoor cafes, apparently. And he was just sitting there. It was a drizzly, rainy day. He's sitting under the canopy, and he's having a cocktail, and wouldn't you know it, up comes and sits beside him Cinderella. And he's beside himself. I mean, my goodness, there's this gorgeous, I think she's blonde. And so, he had got this nerve up and asked her if he could buy her a drink. And she said, sure. And they had some small talk. One thing led to another. He asked her out. But apparently the prince was in town that weekend. And so she passed and apparently broke poor Humpty's heart, even though he had just met her. And so the song is going to tell about what really did happen to poor old Humpty Dumpty, and of course, the subsequent cover-up. I don't know if the young people, we have psychiatrists at all of our shows, children's psychiatrists standing by in case there are some young people, because it's, it's a kind of a dark story. Yes. All right. Fairy tale. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. She said her name was Cinderella, from under her umbrella with the blues. He said his name was Mr. Donkey, she could call him Humpty if she chose. Think where it wasn't it a pity that dear old New York City was more and more resembling a zoo. Humpty talked of birds and berries, and the Staten Island Ferry, and the moon. And Cinderella showed her blisters, she told them of her sisters and her broom. And how she sweated with the sweeping, for they're always out and reeking of perfume. And hey, 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 did you lose your shoe? Hey, 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 did you lose your shoe? And as the sky was clearing, he asked her most endearing to the ball. She said she didn't have a skirt, in a voice that was quite curt, but he could call. But she never gave a number, just left him there to wonder by the wall. And hey, 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 did you lose your shoe? Hey, 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 did you lose your shoe? We all know Cinderella's story, of her fortune and her glory very well. And of Mr. Dumpty's fall from his perch upon the wall, no need to tell. But after close inspection, I can't help but pose the question, maybe Humpty Dumpty jumped instead of fell. He'll never tell. Everybody sing. Hey, 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 did you lose your shoe? Hey, 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 did you lose your shoe? Yeah, yeah, you lose your shoe. Yeah. You lose your shoe. Yes.
Wow.
Poor old Humpty.
I think we are going to need the psychiatrist for the kiddies, though. Well,
Yeah, it's crazy. When I had no, I often use this song as an example of, song. I did some songwriting classes a number of years ago down in South Carolina at a college down there in the summertime. And, talk about how a song evolves. I mean, I just came up with this lick and something came out, hey, did you lose your shoe? And I went, what's that supposed to mean? Where'd that come from? And then I said, all right, well, Cinderella lost her shoe. All right, so she said her name was Cinderella. And then I said, who's she going to meet, and the prince was too obvious. So I had her meet Humpty Dumpty, so put that in. And I had no idea that Humpty was going to jump instead of fall until I got to the last verse, and it just wrote itself. So I didn't have it planned out. It just evolved. You start writing lyrics, and next thing you know, things happen.
yeah, I know. Well, I love it. Just very, very quickly, that was such a special time in history when you first started out. Because as you said, Aztec two-step was intertwined with the history of folk rock in America. I mean, you appeared in concert with all the heavy hitters, the Beach Boys, Michael Bolton, Neil Sedaka, Seals and Croft, Judy Collins, Jose Feliciano, Bruce Springsteen. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on. So what were artists saying at that time? I mean, were they expressing certain things? What was on their minds? I mean, if you could just sort of nutshell that. And what is
What were the
different
artists? What? I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
Well, what was on their minds in this social time in history? Because
I have no idea.
I mean, we had the Vietnam War happening, protesting this and that and the other thing. Because all of your songs are saying something special. They're not just entertainment. They all
Well,
have something
I
to
have
say.
some. I certainly have. I mean, the Kerouac song was a good example. I would write songs about literature or some current events. By and large, I wrote introspective love songs and things like that. But occasionally I would write a topical song, and it's the most difficult song to write because you really can come off preachy and whatnot. So it's hard to write that kind of song. But over the years, we've accumulated enough of them that we actually put a record out called Cause and Effect, and it had 16 songs that had some kind of relevance to topical things that were going on. I wrote a song for my sister Andrea as sort of just a letter from home. She was working for the OEO, Office of Economic Opportunity, for the State Department in processing refugees and stuff. So I wrote a song called Living in America that was written during the Reagan regime, actually. So I got to have some, talks about some political points in that, but just broad strokes about, living in America and so on and so forth. So and we had an album called that as well. So that's a long-winded version, but at that point, we were just lucky. Well, not lucky. We actually deserved to be on Elektra Records. Jack Holtzman, who signed The Doors, and so on and so forth. Judy Collins, you mentioned, a number of really wonderful artists. And I thought it took us actually from the time Neil and I met, the day that we met to the day we finished mixing our album, 1 year had passed. And it felt like an eternity. We met in an open mic night in Boston. We moved down to New York 2 months later. 3 months later, we're signed to Elektra Records. And 3 months after that, or whatever it was, we were out in LA and finished recordings. And at that time, when you're 23, 24 years old, it feels like an eternity. And, we just, because we got a lot of FM airplay, we never had a hit single, but we had what they call turntable hits. And we got a tremendous amount of FM airplay on progressive radio stations, college radio stations. And that's what we built our fan base on. And that's how we were able to, perform with so many people. And for instance, Michael Bolton opened for us. Talking Heads opened for us. Sean Colvin opened for us because, they were just starting out and we'd already had our foot in the door. And, but then we co-headlined with Bruce Springsteen in '74 because our record came out before his first record did. And we were equal draws at that point at a little club in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. But he totally impressed me as a brilliant artist. And
wow,
I knew he was going on, to be, and he had the whole band with him then. Neil and I performed as an acoustic duo. Yeah. So it was good that we opened the show because I went on first because he would have, buried us if we had followed that.
With the horn section and everything, right?
Yeah, Clarence was in the band. He had just joined the band.
Oh, man.
Matt, could you make me make me a little smaller because I keep missing most of make me smaller and Dodie and
while you're doing that, I just say that Neil and I, even though we were known as an acoustic duo, much like Simon and Garfunkel were, or Seals and Crofts, everybody made records back then with full bands. They weren't an official part of the band, but they were studio musicians, and all our studio albums were fully produced. So now, since Neil retired and Dodie is in the band, she brings not only her acoustic guitar but her brilliant electric guitar playing and keyboards as well. We tour as a 5-piece band, and that picture that you had momentarily.
Yeah, can we see that picture again, Matt? Can we see that picture of the quintet?
So we have a horn player too. He plays flute, sax, tenor sax, and alto sax.
Yeah, and clarinet.
He's fabulous.
So,
yeah. Well, could we hear another song? How about "Rabbit in the Moon"? And tell.
Oh, all right.
What is the Rabbit in the Moon?
Well, that's a good example of one of the songs, topical songs, but it really was a fictitious thing. I was reading a book called Aztecs, or the Aztecs, and in the book they kept referencing the rabbit in the moon, which apparently their culture, the women folk, would use that as a I guess is a goddess of fertility. They saw the rabbit. I grew up looking for, the old man in the moon. I think even green. Anybody remember green cheese?
Oh yeah,
and
I do.
Yeah, so I never saw the rabbit in the moon, but when I read about this, I started looking for it. It took me 3 tries, and you don't even need a full moon, but you need at least 3/4 of the moon to really be able to see it. But when the moon first comes up, it's bunny ears, which in this picture in the far left, or I don't know what side, but the one that's not the obvious bunny in the middle, but the ears come up at about 2 and 3 o'clock. If you look at the moon as a clock, its nose is about at midnight. Its ears, bunny ears, are about 2 and 3, and then its bunny tail is down there about 6. And when I first saw it, it was like, oh my God, there's the rabbit. And that's all I see now. And it's so much fun when I'm out with people who haven't seen the rabbit, to show it to them, and it's really a lot of fun. But I just took this position of there's this rabbit who was a vegetarian and doesn't hunt and kill things, and it's sitting up there in the moon and it's looking down on Earth, going, "What the heck is going on down there?" So don't let the floppy ears and lucky feet lull you to sleep, because it really is a song about nuclear holocaust, and we're living with the threat every single day, it could happen with one stupid mistake and we're all toast. So anyway, that's where this song comes from. Oh, I should put my harmonica on, Albert. All right. This song is on the Living in America album as well. So here we go. I woke out of a dream one night, got blinded by a brilliant light. Through the window of my room, I saw the rabbit in the moon. I read about it long ago, in a country now called Mexico, before the ancient Aztec rose. We saw the rabbit in the moon. The night was clear, the moon was full. I could feel its tidal pull. It looked so bright, so white and round, and the rabbit's head was pointing down. The rabbit is so soft and sweet, with floppy ears and lucky feet. And though it cannot fly or sing, it's never harmed one living thing. When the Spaniards brought their holy wars, conquering conquistadors, it made the rabbit's blood run cold to see them kill for greed of gold. Now modern man has weaponry to blast us all into eternity, designed by our most brilliant minds to kill us all 10,000 times. Could history repeat once more? But these modern day conquistadors, and would you think it Looney Tunes to see the rabbit in the moon? I often think about that night when I was woken by that light. Was it light that stole my dream, or did I hear the rabbit scream?
love it. Yay. Wow.
Thank you.
The new song that you just finished recording, I know you started it for Neil after his wife died, but now it has become something else for everyone who has lost someone that they love. And I would love to hear that song.
Oh, okay. Well, Dodie had a lot to do with it. As you said, I started it when Neil's wife Karen passed away at the end of 2017, and he retired shortly after that. That was obviously a tipping point for him, and he was. So when Dodie was already sitting in with us before Neil retired, and on keyboard and doing some vocals, and so I started the song, and then when Dodie and I got married and moved in, and of course I heard and learned about the late great Kevin Gray. Dodie when I had met her, we met in '79, but over the years we touched base. I got to meet Kevin once over at the Pavilion in Westport, and I got familiar with his music, a lot of it through the Phantom, which is extraordinary, as you mentioned. Anyway, I'm losing my train of thought.
You're gonna say how you presented me with the song in
right.
November after Neil's wife passed.
Yes,
and we started dabbling on it a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, and you had gone. I mean, I saw you in
the same thing.
I saw you in the throes of your grief, and it was very painful to see. But obviously, you were able to really help refine a lot of the lyrics, and you also wrote an amazing musical section to it as well, which I would never have done. That's the great thing about a collaboration, that you get to oftentimes do things that you would never have done on your own, and this is a great example of that. So this again, this is called Words. How do you tell someone? It's very difficult. It was a difficult song to write. It took forever to refine the lyrics in this, and I heard the great thing about art, and it certainly applies to songwriting. It's never finished. It's just abandoned, and this is a good. This certainly is. You could put this there as well. How do you tell someone who's lost someone who's never coming back? The sadness that surrounds your heart will fade but not to black. Words of vapid vessels, cold comfort at their best, filled with good intentions while your life is laid to rest. How do you tell someone who's lost someone they treasure in the door? That somehow they'll move past the pain of facing nevermore. There are no silver bullets, and everyone knows that. It just hurts a whole lot worse when you keep on looking back. But words are all we have till sorrow slips away. Every minute, every hour, every second, every day. Words that we keep searching for, reaching for in vain. Tumble out onto the floor or circle round the drain. How do you tell someone who lost someone, then gets lost themselves? It may take a long, long time to crawl out of this hell. No one knows for certain if or when that time will come. We hold on tight with all our might as we circle around the sun. But words are all we have till sorrow slips away, swirling in the memories of endless yesterdays. Waking up each morning, faking it till when sleeping all this mercy overtakes us once again. But words are beautiful when spoken from the heart, and words are meaningful until death do us part. Regardless of their fervor, no matter how they're parsed, time alone and only time can ease an aching heart.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so
What an
beautiful.
audience.
So, well, thank you so much. It just, yeah,
Mwah!
love
Thank
to go
you,
on
Beth.
and on. Mwah. Thank you. So I guess we're wrapping up the show. So everybody has to come back for a bow if you're still here. And as we're wrapping up, we have a little, Matt put this little tip jar up in the top of the right screen that you can, I believe you can click on if you want to put a buck or two in it to help me keep the shows going, because I would love to. And so thank you, everyone. And of course, stick around for the end credits and get ready to dance. But meanwhile, Jane Hoffman and Steve Gruber, are you there?
Yes, we are.
Yay! Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And Dodie and Rex, take a bow.
Hi.
Yay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Beth.
Thank
Love ya.
you.
You. Talk to you soon. Mark Roos, are you there? There you are.
Yes. Hello. Thank you. This was great.
And Matt.
Beth, good job.
Oh, thank you. There's our Matt. And Angus. Come on. Let's see you. Let's. There. And that's it. So get ready to get your sassy on, whatever that means to you, whether it's stiletto heels or biker chick duds or whatever. So, Dodie, okay. Yeah. It's pretty.
I was driving my new Chevy, I had just pulled into town, when this guy pulled up beside me and rolled his window down. He said, let's get together later, grinning like a Cheshire cat. But I said, I've been there and I done that. I've been there, I done that, I ain't going back. I've been around that barn, got the t-shirt and the hat. You can say what you want, but I know where it's at, because I've been there and I done that. It was 2:30 in the morning when I heard the telephone ring. It was my little cousin Frankie, back in trouble again. He said, spot me a few hundred, I swear I'll pay you right back. But I said, I've been there, Frankie, and I done that. I've been there, I done that, I ain't going back. I've been around that barn, got the t-shirt and the hat. You can say what you want, but I know where it's at, because I've been there and I done that. Now I've tried to live by the golden rule, but I've learned a few things they don't teach in school. I can spot a dog about a mile down the track. I've been there, I done that, I ain't going back. I was minding my own business when I looked up to see 200 pounds of perfect wrapped in Levi's jeans. I knew I'd take a ride when he smiled and tipped his hat, because I ain't been there